What's up, you guys? Happy Monday. It's episode 46. We look a little windblown. We went on our walk today and it's like a hurricane out there, so
caterpillars were a little
don't mind the craziness. How are you guys? Happy Monday. We think we're in our maybe last week of like crazy shutdown, but we'll see. Hi, Shelly. So we'll see. But anyway, we want to talk today about how to stop asking doubt-producing questions. So this kind of goes to a couple things we've talked about. We've talked about the win-then game. We've talked about asking like the power of language. We've talked about why questions matter. We've talked about what's good about this problem. So we want to go a little bit deeper into that and give you guys another way to look at it.
So one thing, if you're a coach or basically anything that provides service, I think one thing, in looking over our career over the last, 20 years of working with people, I would say, especially in people find out what we do in our umbrella is, I've always wanted to try that, right? I've been meaning to reach out to you and ask for help, but I feel like I need to do this first, right? Like,
I have to be in better shape before I start.
I always wanted to start CrossFit, but I need to be in better shape before I start that, right? And like the part that we always try to explain is like, well, the only way to get in shape by doing what you're asking to do is by doing it, correct? And so, what that is it's a doubt producing question, right? And so we talked about how questions drive our focus, drive our actions, and the underlying beliefs and everything through there. If you haven't seen that, go back through
the very beginning.
Yes.
Episode 3.
But go back through there. That will kind of dive more into like what specifically questions do for us. But at the same time, like, have you ever done something, right? Like you're going to go for a job interview or you're about to make a phone call or you're going to reach out and have a conversation that isn't necessarily ideal or it's going to be uncomfortable. And all of a sudden, like, your thought process of it is like tenfold worse than the actual experience. Now, the reason behind that, you guys, is because when we think about doing something, whether it's to drive ourselves and moving towards moving the needle in the direction we want to, accomplishing a goal, doing something we know we have to do, whatever we have to do, in order for once I designate a question in my brain, my brain actually interacts it and actually acts it out in order for me to do it, right? Like, yet again, in order for me to talk to you, I have to ask the question, like, where do I have to look? What should I say? What should my mannerisms be like, right? Like, my brain is actually doing those things on a subconscious level for me to interact with you guys. Now, when we do that, right, like, for instance, say somebody wants to come into the gym. Oftentimes, Mr. Nate, always appreciate you, buddy. Oftentimes, like, hey, I want to go try a CrossFit class. The next thing that follows with that is like, oh shit, I've never done that. I haven't worked out for the last 20 years. All I see is people on ESPN exercising. Like, what if that class is exactly like that? Which it's not, right? Like, our brain starts playing these episodes for us. Now, what that is, you guys, is that's just artificial. That's non-existent. All right. So it's important for us to understand that it's an imaginary thing, right? Like, we're trying to essentially make reason with something that's imaginary, right? And so what we start doing there is like, oh, okay, I want to go do this, right? I'm excited about it. I'm going to do this. But then all of a sudden my brain starts playing that out. But it's also important to understand, you guys, is our brain is rooted in fear.
So think about this. If fear is false evidence appearing real, that's all it's doing. Mm-hmm. It's creating a story that doesn't actually exist, but it's the fear story of what if, right? It's the what if questions. And then it just spins into you believing that might actually be real and creating a ton of doubt.
Well, and the reason for that is because, yet again, your brain's 2 million years old. It's had to evolve from a place of keeping you alive, right? Like, your brain's job is not to make you happy. That's your job. Your brain's job is to keep you safe and protect you. And so when we start having those imaginary thoughts, it starts playing out kind of the worst case scenario. Yet again, have you ever had a conversation or had to have a conversation and prior leading up to that, or a job interview or something, and prior leading up to that, like, you're just dreading it because you feel like it's going to be the worst experience of your life, and then all of a sudden you do it and it was like, well, that really wasn't that bad. That's because that's how your brain works. And so when you're going through these things, you guys, it's understanding that you're all these feelings, all these thoughts, all these emotions, all these sensations you start to feel before you take action are all normal. Now, what makes the difference between people that accomplish or move themselves in the direction is they understand and how to deal with that, right? Because the other thing we work a lot with our clients on is the aspect that no matter what thought you ever feel, somebody else has also had that thought. right? No matter what fear, whatever scarcity, whatever those, somebody else out there has also probably experienced that. Probably the vast majority of human beings have also experienced that in some shape or some form. The ones that allow themselves to get on the other side just understand how to deal with it better and how to direct their focus and their questions better.
Well, and it's understanding too that like, if this is happening for you and it's subconscious, when you bring it to your conscious mind, then you get to do it the other way, right? So what if you went to this CrossFit gym and it was amazing and all the people are super nice and everyone was in normal shape and you actually were able to do the thing that you wanted to do and it was the best experience of your life? That's also maybe not real, but it's writing your story. We've talked about this before, is that if you're subconsciously going into the fear mode, you can consciously write your what ifs and write them the way you want them to go. Because again, the energy you show up, the focus that you have, you're going to play into that story, right? And so if you play into the story of like, this is going to be terrible, it's going to be so scary, it's going to be awful, you'll probably create that, right? But if you're like, oh, this is going to be amazing, it's going to be awesome, I'm so excited to learn new things, you go in open, you go in expansive, you go in excited, you're going to have a totally different outcome than if you go in with a different energy. So that's the beautiful thing to understand, is that when you know what's going on, you're like, all right, what do I want to have happen? Like, write it out. Exactly what do you want to have happen? Like, we've got some stuff going on in our lives, and I've literally written out how it's going to go, how it's going to show up, exactly what it's going to do. Like, you get to create that in your life. And so pay attention to the fact that you have that power and you are in creation with the universe, God, whatever you believe in. So you get to rewrite that story. And again, when you don't realize it's happening for you or to you, then you get to look at it and go, oh, that does happen when I start to do things. And then you just get to shift it. And then again, you get to be the driver. You get to be taking action versus reacting to the things that you've always done. And we can talk about why all those things come from, but go watch the last 45 days.
That's the solution to the problem, right? Like, that's always the part that we always go, okay, that's great, I have those things, but how do I stop that? And it's simply action, right? Like, just do it, right? Like, it doesn't mean like you have to go like jumping out of a plane and do those kind of things to face your fears, although that would probably diminish that pretty quickly. It's simply just taking action, right? And that's the one thing we've taught, yet again, go back into previous episodes, but that's the one thing we try to instill to all our clients we work with, is it doesn't have to be this massive monumental jump. It starts small, start and be consistent, right? Like, as long as you can start small and be consistent and feel progress, you're going to keep moving in the direction. But it's when we allow ourselves to live into those doubt-producing questions and understand, and we start owning them, right? Like, that's the other thing we talked about with questions, is the second I start owning that idea or owning that feeling or owning whatever, right? Like, I'm an anxious person, I'm an overwhelmed person, I'm an emotional person, I'm an out of shape person, I'm just a fat person, I'm a super athletic person, whatever that means, you guys, and we start attaching ourselves to that, it is very difficult for us to release that and let it move on, because now we own it and we have attached ourselves to it. So yet again, it's being able to be the observer of your current
awareness, yes. Right? Everything we talk about, awareness first, observation, non-judgment, and then action, right? It doesn't matter what you're trying to do in this life. If you take those steps, you're going to get into that. And most of us right now don't even have any awareness that this is happening for us, right? And we still catch ourselves all the time, and like protectors show up, old stories show up that you don't even realize you're leaning into, and you're like, why is that playing in my mind? But then the cool thing is you don't have to judge it. You get to bring awareness to it. You get to love it. You get to love the part of you that still needs that. And then, like Brandon said, you get to take action into the direction you're going to go. And what do we say? What we've been teaching Carson how to ride a bike. We're like momentum, right? Like momentum, get some action, keep it going. And then it's all just that much easier because you're in the right energy and you're already moving towards that person and that thing that you're trying to go towards.
Well, and it's important too, also, you guys, is when how many times in your life have you had like that emotion where you're like supercharged, super motivated, I'm ready to tackle the world, and all of a sudden an hour goes by, a day goes by, and all of a sudden you're like, that thing I wanted to do of like changing my life, I'll put it off till tomorrow. Right? Like, how many times does that come out and produce itself in some shape or some form in your life, right? And so when you can identify these things and then you're producing that motivation, that drive, that go in action, that's when it's vital for you to do something. Doesn't have to be massive, but just do something to get that ball rolling, right? Like, in that moment, sign up for something, do something, so that way you produce action behind the motivation that's getting you going on there. Because every decision, we talked about that last time, every decision that we do is based off our feelings and our emotions. And so if you can harness that drive and identify like, okay, yet again, is this a disempowering thought? Is this not something that is serving me right now? But if I'm in that moment, like where I can change that, identify that and say, hey, you know what? This is my time. I'm going to do this. But what is the next step is just simply by taking action in some shape or some form.
Right. And yeah, it's, hi, Callie. It's taking that little step, right? Of like that little step towards that thing. And understanding that it's the little steps and that growth and everywhere you want to go is always outside of your comfort zone, right? Like, if you're not outside of your comfort zone, sorry, Carson, go. If you're not outside of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow, right? And so we've got to see that stuff. We've got to understand that, like, you can take that little step outside your comfort zone and realize that actually your comfort zone is way bigger than you realize. It actually is. You're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, right? Like, jump out of a plane. Nothing will seem hard. But, yeah. Anything else? Sorry. Carson's like, you know, she's 6 and
her
Skylar,
sister's asleep, so
Skylar's
she wants
sleeping, so goodness sakes, could she spend that much time? But
well, and I think with all this, you guys, is yet again, I think it's very important for us to all understand that all those thoughts, all the self-doubt, all these things, I don't care if it's somebody who makes $1 billion, somebody who's the fittest person in the world, somebody who's just getting off the couch for the first time or is just trying to get a job for the first time. All these all these thoughts, all these self-doubts, all these things, we all have them, right? And so it's understanding that those thoughts are not yours. That is your brain, okay? That's the mind, that's the brain and the mind doing those things to protect you, right? But it's important to be able to observe those things and not attach those things of like, because there's an old saying, the thinker thinks and the finder finds, and your brain reacts like that. And so when my brain thinks certain things, but then when I say certain things, it wants to find and prove that information right. And so when I go into that illusionary world of like everything's going to be tenfold worse than what it probably is actually going to be, my brain's actually seeking out information to show that's right, right? Like you've said this 1,000,000 times in your life, and the last time you did it, you failed, or last time you did it, you fell on your face, or last time you did it, all these things happened. When really those things probably never happened because you never allowed yourself to get started, right? And so that's the part that we really try to harness in with all our clients, all the people that we coach on there is everything that you're feeling are all natural. It's just how can we create a system to get you moving in the direction that you want to, and it's simple by just small incremental actions.
Well, it's changing the relationship to the fear too. I mean, this is a whole nother tangent, but like, it's not trying to get rid of it. It's not trying to force it away. It's not trying to do any of those things. It's like, it's asking a different question and then loving the fear, honoring the fear, knowing that the fear is showing you that you're probably moving in the right direction, right? Because if nothing's scary, your life's probably pretty boring, right? And so like growth comes from those little scary steps. And so like, it's not getting rid of the fear, but it's changing the relationship to those feelings, readjusting the story and then moving towards that, and then the stories will start to change, right? The feedback loop changes and you're like, oh, the last time I felt this, I used to think it was anxiety and now I think it's excitement. So I better go do that thing. That means I need to start moving forward. That means I better take those steps. Because like if we all waited to do anything in life until we were ready, none of us would do anything. None of us would have children. None of us would like, if you waited till you knew you were absolutely ready to do anything, we would never get anywhere.
Well, it's the same thing we talked about this yet again in another episode of just changing your relationship with pain, right? Like you can tell pain is just another relationship. You can call it fear, right? Like it's not comfortable. There's friction there, right? And like maybe you have a friend or maybe you're that person yourself of like, no matter what, that person always seems to just do it, right? Like they don't have it figured out. They just did it. And like, where on the other end, you got that person that wants to like know every single little blueprint, every little nut and bolt of any plan that's going to go on, but they're still stuck in the scenario that they've been stuck in, even though they have tenfold the amount of knowledge, the amount of credibility, whatever it may be, but they just don't get themselves going because there's no action behind the plan in which they're doing, right? And so that's why you need both of them. But it's also changing, like Courtney said, is changing that relationship to them, right? Like when you first do something, there's going to be a massive level of discomfort, right? Like we see that all the time with people that come in to see us the first time. That first month, like what we tell everyone is we want you to leave the gym feeling like you could have done a little bit more, because we know the small incremental steps is what grows. After a month or two, you're like, sweet, I can't believe I'm doing what I never even thought I could do a month ago. But due to steps in the process to that, you're able to accomplish far more than what you walked in the door thinking you could ever do.
So tomorrow, because we've gone sort of off a tangent, but this is a good tangent. So tomorrow we're going to talk about resistance and dissidence, right? And so what we need to understand is that when we're only in our heads, right? You hear us talk about this all the time of dropping into your body, finding alignment, listening to your intuition. So tomorrow we're going to talk to you guys about what is the difference between resistance and dissidence, because that's actually learning how do you take the answers from your body and how do you actually tap into your intuition so you can listen to something other than just your brain and then move from that place. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. What's the difference between resistance and dissidence? But hopefully that was super helpful. Anything else? All right, guys, we appreciate you. Hope you're having an awesome Monday, and we'll chat with you guys tomorrow.
Lady all.